Good afternoon and welcome to TechNation's Tools of the Trade live demo. Today we'll learn more about the tools of the trade, the Claroty xDome, which is also featured in the May issue of TechNation magazine. We're joined by Adina Shoneman, Principal Product Marketing Healthcare at Claroty, and Ty Greenhall, Global Healthcare Industry Principal at Claroty. And they will be demonstrating learning more on how to implement effective and efficient strategies regarding exposure management in Claroty xDome for healthcare. In Claroty xDome, you can benchmark your risk against your industry peers, understand device risk scores and profiles, and better manage vulnerabilities and exposures. Please note that the presenters have provided handouts for you all, which you'll find in the handout section of your dashboard. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Claroty. As the world's most trusted healthcare cybersecurity company, Claroty empowers HDOs to comprehensively monitor and manage risk across their healthcare extended Internet of Things environment. Whether it be through a medical device or a building management system, attack surfaces grow as connected assets expand, creating security blind spots that pose risks to availability, integrity, and safety. Claroty tackles these risks to ensure cyber and operational resilience are within your reach. For more information, please visit claroty.com. Okay, today's webinar, as usual, is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. Now, if you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Now, just a quick reminder to please join us for our HTM Mixer being held at the Hyatt Regency in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, July the 31st and August the 1st. Our mixers are a slightly modified, smaller, shorter duration and less crowded event that still provides valuable continuing education, networking and vendor engagement opportunities. So for more information and registration details, please visit htmmixer.com. Also, very quickly, please save the date for our fall MD Expo, which we held at the Renaissance Dallas at the Addison Hotel in Dallas, Texas, from November the 10th to the 12th. Join us for 3 days of education, networking, and the latest advances in medical technology products and services. For more information and registration details, please visit mdexposhow.com. Okay, let's kick off today's demonstration by giving away a Swiss Force Meister multi-tool. So using the questions feature on your dashboard, let me know the answer to the following trivia question. May is National Salad Month. What is the most popular salad dressing? I'll reveal the answer and our winner at the end of the webinar. Now, today's presentation is pre-recorded, so there won't be a live Q&A, sorry. But if you have any questions, I will forward them to the presenters after the webinar has finished.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. We are here from Claroty. My name is Adina Shoneman. I'm a Principal Product Marketing here for Claroty's Healthcare business. And I'd like to introduce Ty. You want to introduce yourself, Ty?
Delighted. Thanks, Adina. My name is Ty Greenhall. I'm the Global Industry Principal for Healthcare for the Center of Excellence and basically responsible for healthcare strategy and coordination of activities amongst all of our different departments for the healthcare vertical.
Awesome. Thanks. And thanks for joining us. And we are here to talk about a very exciting topic here at Claroty. We are going to dive into exposure management, what we feel that means for the healthcare industry, and why you as teams associated with biomedical engineering may want to start thinking about this from a cybersecurity perspective. We'll talk a little bit about what it means in the industry, and then we'll finish out with what it means for our product offering here at Claroty and give you a quick preview into what this looks like in our product as well. So with that, walk through a quick agenda of what we're going to cover today. We want to introduce, at a high level, cybersecurity, why you should be thinking about it, or maybe how you should be thinking about it if you are it's not a priority today. Cover what exposure management means in healthcare environments, why Claroty xDome specifically may be an interesting solution for your organization to think about if you haven't already, and then again finish out with a demo. So to jump right in, why cybersecurity and why now? Well, as we think about what cybersecurity means in the realm of healthcare environments, it's of particular concern to biomedical engineering teams in the notion of medical device security. So why should this be a consideration in your role or for serving your overall organization today? We really think about this in three key areas. One being patient safety, the other being financial implications for your business, and also overall operational impacts for how you're running your departments today. On patient safety, when we think about what this means in the realm of your day-to-day operations or the proper operation of medical devices, we can tie it to the fact of cyber incidents. So within the past year, about 65% of cyber incidents have particularly been impacted in the realm of a medical device or another device that may live outside of traditional IT, like an IoT device or a building management system, etc., resulting in disruptions to operations or patient care to business. We also understand that paying attention to where a device is in its life cycle may have an impact on the proper operation or safety of the device. For example, medical devices tend to live beyond their useful life. About 14% of medical devices are reported to be currently operating unsupported or end of life. So it's important to think about how devices are being used and if they're being maintained in a proper way to maintain safety. Next, financial implications. So about 69% of healthcare organizations today have experienced financial impacts of $100,000 or more when it comes to cyber incidents. So why is that important from a medical device perspective? Because we do see many cyber incidents impacting the medical device, whether it originates there or is a part of the vulnerability spread. And so it's something to think about, for the continued operation of your healthcare organization, the types of impacts that it could have. And then lastly, operational impacts. So over 40% of organizations have experienced a downtime of 12 hours or more when it comes to cyber attacks. That's critical in a healthcare organization where continued operation is critical, and how you're best managing cybersecurity processes and controls can have a very strong impact to recovery times, loss of intellectual property, proper maintenance of these types of devices. And so these are really three key areas that we think make sense to help you justify why you should be thinking about cybersecurity as part of your biomed processes today.
I would also say there, Adina, I think that the trajectory of all those statistics is going the wrong way. I mean, it's the vulnerability. There's the base of assets being attached to the network is increasing at an exponential rate. Therefore, the number of vulnerabilities being discovered are as well. And so the size of the breaches for the financial impact, when you start thinking about Change and Ascension and Yale, and the numbers are becoming astronomical in the cost to the organizations, and to hit the smaller organizations, probably put them out of business. So I think that just the trajectory on this is heading the wrong direction. And so focusing on this topic to basically create a resilience around this device type and being able to not only recover faster, but kind of monitor and prevent as well is very timely and necessary to support the critical infrastructure of healthcare.
100%, right? Healthcare continues to be an increasingly targeted industry, and as we see those trends changing, understanding or maybe reevaluating where you are in your cybersecurity program efforts is absolutely key. Thanks for adding that additional color. And kind of on that note, so as you think about in your role today and how you're considering cybersecurity, something that we really want to bring up in the context of exposure management, the topic we're going to cover today, but also the overall programmatic approach to your program is, do you know all of your stakeholders across the business? Cybersecurity, medical device cybersecurity specifically, is something critical to think about in your own clinical engineering career. But there are several stakeholders impacted, influenced, or have a role to play as a part of this business. So just want to highlight a couple key areas within healthcare organizations that you may want to consider building relationships, or at the very least maybe understand why cybersecurity might matter for some of these teams. Obviously, information technology is critical. While you may be the device owner of medical devices within biomed, the proper operation or the integration into existing IT security, enterprise risk assessments, etc., tend to live over the overall umbrella of information technology, or as well as information security teams. When it comes to information security teams specifically, you may have just a general IT security team. You may have networking teams who focus on things such as segmentation or the proper operation of your network. You may have a SOC team, etc. So while you may be managing the medical device aspects of security, there's likely a whole IT security team behind you specialized in specific areas and roles. It's important to understand that and maybe understand where the proper management of medical devices come into play in their existing processes and controls. Facilities management, we add here as the fact that we want to highlight specifically here at Claroty, we focus on protecting and securing the medical device, but we also focus on protecting and securing devices that are not really under the umbrella of traditional IT, but are absolutely critical to hospital operations. So, for example, operational technology, business building automation systems, things like elevators, HVAC systems, really the core functionality that healthcare buildings and facilities are being managed by, they require cybersecurity processes and controls too, but they're often similar to medical devices, a blind spot. So something to think about is you're building out cybersecurity efforts. Are your facilities management teams properly managing your security protocols and kind of where they fit into the relationship with your teams? Next, compliance. So a key aspect of any cybersecurity program is understanding the regulatory landscape, any compliance or auditing requirements that you may be adhering to. So ensuring you have a tight relationship there is critical as well. And then lastly, procurement. So cybersecurity or the proper operation and safe operation of devices is absolutely critical. So some things we see here at Claroty is as you get further down your program adoption of a cybersecurity program, how can that influence how you make future procurement decisions moving forward? And really add some data-driven insights on how your devices are performing or what your device inventories look like to better optimize procurement decisions moving forward. So with that, kind of getting the lay of the land, maybe why cybersecurity and maybe, what teams you should be thinking about as you build out a program, I want to pass it over to Ty to introduce the concept of exposure management, why Claroty is really focusing there, and add a little color to what this means specifically in the realm of healthcare environments.
Appreciate that, Dina. So, first I'll say that, with my history in healthcare technology, I've experienced having new technology brought in to the healthcare environment and across multiple departments that didn't used to work together before and needed to. And it's just so clear in those situations, it's a people process technology issue. And the people we were just talking about there, and with departments that like network engineering and biomed tech, it didn't always work together. And then, you bring these new groups together, and that's great, but you need new processes for how you're going to go about solving for the problems at hand. And then there's always the technology that automates that process. And we'll be covering a little bit more about that technology later. But, so the processes, as when we start talking about that, it's right now, I guess it's a job security issue, which is great because there's just not enough of you all out there that are listening, which is wonderful. Except the problem that you're trying to solve is really overwhelming if you go about it in an inefficient manner. So taking a look at this slide, kind of breaking it down, it's a little overwhelming, but basically at the very top, you've got 20 million devices. This is a study that we did. We have, oh gosh, estimated 350 health systems. We have 20 million plus devices under cybersecurity, and I think millions of those are medical devices. So with that, we have a data lake of information that we're able to look at and make some very interesting observations and conclusions. So if you look at that 20 million devices, over on the far right, you've got 22% of them with a CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System. And that's a traditional way to go about your vulnerability management and say, hey, let's go after those devices. And the rest of the devices would just kind of we don't have time for them. They're not as important. They don't have a high CVSS score. But when you try to tackle it this way, there's a couple problems that result. One of them is that you miss hundreds of thousands of devices in this way that are high risk, insecure internet connectivity with known exploitable vulnerabilities. And so as you drill down there, you'll see this, well, the 62% in that 1.9 sliver, you've got 62% of these are high risk devices with the CVSS. So maybe in your approach, if you said, well, we're just going to go after the 22%, that you would get some of that 1.9, but then you're going to miss the ones that didn't have a high CVSS, but were internet connected and have a KEV. So that's really important. It's internet connected and has a known exploitable vulnerability. So when you think about it, if you had to figure out which devices are most critical, let's say it's connected to the internet. So there's a pathway into or out of my perimeter of security, and there is a known exploitable vulnerability, which means that vulnerability is being exploited somewhere else in the world. So when you start thinking about what should you focus on with your limited resources, that's probably a pretty good area to start with. Can we go to the next slide?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of effort going around the nation here in the U.S., of which I participate on the 405D group and the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council. So I'm privy to a lot of smart people and much smarter than I am, and I learn all this and here really just to share it. But the group HHS has come up with the top threats to cybersecurity, one of which is phishing and social engineering, which is a way to come in to engage with the hospital. But then really the second one is internet facing devices with known exploitable vulnerabilities. I mean, clearly what we were just talking about, it's one of the top 3 attack vectors. And the third being a third party risk, being able to your third parties, their access to your organizations, and if they are compromised, them being able to enter into your environment and then move laterally and put in malware, which is ransomware. So that's kind of how they're going about doing it. So I wanted to call out that internet-facing devices with known exploitable vulnerabilities, one of the top 3 that allows the attacker to penetrate and then install ransomware. If we go to the next slide, the kind of further that concept, really wanted to drill this in, is that as you look at this graphic, you've got on the far left, you've got CVEs, which are common vulnerability exposures. There's hundreds of thousands of those. So there's, and then you say, okay, well, we're going to whittle that down and try to organize all those vulnerabilities that cause exposure and into the CVSS scoring system. And if we just say, well, we're just going to look at the critical ones, you're like, that's still 30,000. Whereas if you bring this out, you end up with 350 under the known exploitable vulnerabilities. So it's a much tighter group to go after with a potentially higher criticality, and that's really how we want you to be thinking about managing your vulnerability management or your exposure management process. It's a way to be efficient and effective at scale. So one more slide there. So as we look at our data lake that I was talking about, one of the things that we have found here is that we can break it out by device type. We're able to see all this. So not only are we able to see the device, which is really much harder than people think, because these devices aren't like IT devices. They don't communicate the same way. And so, which causes another big blind spot for organizations that don't use our technology to identify the devices. Oh, by the way, I'll say that in the new HIPAA security rule update, that it is kind of, maybe it's going to pass, maybe it's not. In there is a requirement to actually be able to do asset inventory on all device types, required. So that's really where the government's moving, not just worried about your HIS system, not just worried about your servers, worried about all device types, because all these are connected to the network. All of them can affect patient care, and all of them are entry points into the network to establish, to load in the malware of ransomware. So as you take a look at these different device types, once you can identify them, the next step is to identify which ones are talking to the internet. And what does that even mean? Is it just a one-way communication? Is it a two-way communication? Should there be internet communication on that type? Is it a device that typically communicates on the internet? So understanding the behavior of those devices is critical. And then when you start thinking, okay, well, let's keep narrowing this down from a Venn diagram perspective, which ones have known exploitable vulnerabilities that are going on right now out there in the wild that also are internet facing, and you can zero down on those devices. And that's kind of the concept of vulnerability, of exposure management, maybe the advanced level of vulnerability management, but much more intelligent and guided. And I'll tell you that none of this can be done without the participation of health technology management and the clinical engineering folks. So you have to be involved in these processes, because the security team, they don't know the difference between device types. They don't know what's critical, what should or shouldn't be talking to the internet, and what the criticalities are. So just kind of with that, that's just a high level overview of the process. Really, we talked about the people and we've talked about the process.
Awesome. Thanks, Ty. And just want to add to, a big driver of us doing this research is we think about building out our own exposure management capabilities in the product, is really understanding what the state looks like to devices that are mission critical to patient care, things like imaging devices, patient devices, etc. So please take a look and download the report. We have a QR code here. It's really interesting stuff. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to anyone here at Claroty. So with that, we'd like to switch gears here and dive in a little bit more into, so, cybersecurity, something that should be top of mind if you're not already thinking about it today. We hope you have a little bit more of an understanding of what exposure management means in the context of healthcare, and why you should be thinking about it. So let's switch gears here today and talk a little bit about our purpose-built healthcare solution here at Claroty, Claroty xDome. It's, again, purpose-built for healthcare environments. Talk a little bit about what our solution does. and a little bit on how we've been innovating from an exposure management side. So with that, backtrack a little bit. Why should you think about a purpose-built technology to protect and secure your medical devices? Or why should this be of concern to a biomed team? And what is your role to play from a technology perspective? So the reality is your IT security team likely has tools in place from a cybersecurity perspective, but they don't adequately protect medical devices, and they're not providing the asset visibility that you need. You need a purpose-built solution that can enable you to get that initial asset inventory of your devices, and one that's reliable and that you feel comfortable sharing the data with various stakeholders across your organization. So some key challenges that we see when it comes to specifically protecting and securing medical devices that we hope this may resonate with you here on the call specifically are things such as you're likely managing a wide range of equipment manufacturers, differing ages of assets that may require different levels of preventative maintenance, etc. And the way you manage these devices are just fundamentally different. You may find it difficult to build and maintain an inventory of these devices. One, if you don't have a solution in place to automate this inventory collection, that can make understanding the scope of these devices differently. Different stakeholders within the organization may be managing some of these devices. And overall, it just may be a challenge to get that initial asset inventory. Next, you may specifically have poor visibility into clinical networks as well as utilization. So understanding what devices on your network is really the first step. Next is, getting an understanding of things like how are these devices and what types of devices are communicating with each other across your network. How can you best build out, efforts to protect and secure these devices with this added context? Do you have an understanding of how the devices themselves are being used? Do you have underutilization issues? Do you have overutilization issues? How does that feed into operational efficiencies or the secure, operable ways of devices or patient safety? And then lastly, just some of the proper maintenance and usage of these devices requires deep domain expertise, both from the operator level, but medical device manufacturers tend to get more involved when it comes to resolving cybersecurity issues, proper patching, maintenance, etc. So these are all things to think about as you think about the proper maintenance of medical devices specifically. And overall, our goal with providing our solution is really hinting at the notion that a modern approach to medical device, IoT, and OT devices on the clinical network, it requires a programmatic approach and one that specifically can focus on the medical device and the nuances of them. So, Claroty for Healthcare, we wanted to take a couple minutes to introduce what this means in the context of our portfolio. So our solution at Claroty for Healthcare is Claroty xDome, and it's a modular-based platform that is based on that foundational asset inventory that helps solve common security use cases or challenges that we may see in your environment today. The first one, exposure management. So what does this mean in the context of the product itself? It's understanding vulnerabilities. It's certainly a core part of it, but it's also things like providing a risk profile or a risk score on each device, understanding your overall security posture, benchmarking it across the industry, and also looking at an overarching view of overall exposures in your network beyond just vulnerability management, and understanding how to identify and act on those in a timely and efficient manner. Next, our solution offers network protection capabilities. This is all about enabling proper network segmentation, understanding traffic analysis and device communications on your network, and enabling you to implement policies and integrating with your existing network infrastructure that you may already have on the IT side. Secure access is a newer solution in portfolio. This is focusing specifically on third-party connectivity, or how you're properly managing third-party risks, incorporating the nuances of privileged access management and an overall programmatic approach to managing third-party vendors on your network. threat detection. So this is all about thinking about how can you proactively detect threats with clinical awareness from the medical device side to ensure that you're weeding through false positives and focusing on threats that impact patient safety or cybersecurity the most. And then lastly, we do have an operational efficiency component of our product. We essentially profile major clinical devices, medical devices within your network, and help to monitor trends such as utilization metrics, location information about your devices, device lifecycle changes, and also offer automated efficiency recommendations to improve operations moving forward. So that's kind of the depth and breadth of the Claroty portfolio. After this webinar, if you're interested in exposure management or any of these key areas that we offer, don't hesitate to reach out to someone here at Claroty who can give you a little bit more context of what this looks like when it comes to rolling out and solving these types of challenges within your healthcare environment. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Ty to kind of walk through what we're thinking about in the context of exposure management and what our solution offers today.
Yeah, thank you, Adina. I really like drilling down into the exposure management piece, and for healthcare, we really think about this as vulnerability management, but this is there's some nuances here, and I'll call those out because to just do vulnerability management, like I was saying earlier, there's just too many vulnerabilities, and the vulnerabilities are increasing at an unsustainable rate to try and chase them all. So there's got to be a smarter way to go about it. And Gartner's come up with a model, continuous threat exposure management is what they call it, CTEM. And basically, if you go around the loop here, just explaining it, pretty simple. I think everybody will get it, but I'll try to drive it home. Is that you don't want to boil the ocean. You really take a section and work on it. What the problem is, what you're trying to achieve, whether it's looking at a device type across the whole health system, or just all the devices in one hospital, or based on criticality of a department, and what are all the devices in that department, and being able to so you define the scope of what you're going to look at first. Then tricky part is finding all the devices on the network, and that becomes quite a challenge, especially when most IT solutions for cybersecurity, you can't ping the devices because they're trying to communicate with them, could knock them over and affect patient care. So they have different technologies that are out there trying to discover these devices. We have a different approach, which provides us greater visibility. And so we welcome you to ask us in and let us show you how we can do that, what kind of visibility we have, that seeing things you don't see. Even if you've got a tool that's similar, oftentimes we show 20 to 30% more devices out there on the network. So it becomes a very interesting exercise. Then you've got the prioritization, which is now which devices are most critical, right? And so that's where, what are the exposures and what is the business impact? So the same device located in one area of the hospital may not be as critical as one in another. So you want to take that into consideration as you are trying to determine the criticality, which will then prioritize your resources, your limited resources, as to what you do first, and then maybe others would be able to other vulnerabilities maybe schedule into the maintenance cycle. So as you're going out there and you're doing a break fix, or you're doing just regular PM work, you can change the settings on a device or what have you to compensate for whatever that vulnerability is. But in this process, you want to validate it, and that's often a long process. We help automate that, but this is really where I think the Biomed's HTM is really owns the relationship with the medical device manufacturer as to, is this a real exposure? Is this a problem? Do you know about it? Is there an update or a patch for this? Are there recommended remediations? So that's that step. That often kind of challenging, but again, automating that process as much as possible. We do more with other vendors than others, but definitely a step that you can automate. And then based on what the outcomes are, what is the mitigation? What is the action or the remediation that should be done? And then scheduling it and getting it done and tracking that it was done. So this whole process, and again, iterative, right? So now there's going to be the next scope, and you go around the horn and make those discovery, and out of those devices and that prioritization, you're working with the network team to identify which devices are or the security team that would be the most critical based on their location, because the IT and security teams aren't going to know that. And so again, this team approach, getting groups of getting departments to work together that haven't worked together before to overcome this challenge, like I was talking about before. This is really the heart of the process, which we have incorporated within the processes and the workflow, data collection, and technology within our system.
Awesome. Thanks for walking through that. So this is kind of like our vision of where we're going, and as we continue to build out our product, really aligning to these key areas and kind of offering that full process is what we really see as the future of exposure management in healthcare environments. So to switch gears here on, okay, so we understand the concept of exposure management. We understand why it's critical and maybe what future state, what a successful exposure management program looks like. What can you do today? What can you implement today that can help you think beyond the scope of traditional vulnerability management, or what are common scenarios that we see other healthcare environments track? So what I'm sharing here is a list that we've gathered leveraging our new exposure scenarios capability in the product, which I can show you momentarily, on common areas that we see healthcare organizations tracking today as critical exposure scenarios to track, some including vulnerabilities, but some including other high-risk scenarios, in order to better and more efficiently secure their environments. So things like specifically targeting medical assets who have a critical vulnerability. That's something we see a lot of organizations use today. But other key high-risk exposures, such as if a device tends to be running a legacy window version, specifically flagging any devices that are exposed or associated as high risk that are also flagged as end of life. Any assets that are currently running or communicating with unencrypted PHI, assets that are flagged as suspicious communications or weak default passwords. These are a couple scenarios that we see popping up more and more within our healthcare customer base, and we expect these to grow as we continue to build out common exposure scenarios with our customers and understand challenges that are popping up most prevalent to get security postures down and ensure that your medical devices are operating properly. So with that, I'd actually like to switch gears here for the remaining couple minutes of the session and dive into the Claroty xDome product. So give me 1 second here. We are going to shift gears to the demo. All right, so if you haven't seen our solution before, this is the Claroty xDome product, and what you're looking at here is our homepage. So essentially, again, our initial goal of implementing a product such as Claroty xDome is giving you that initial visibility into your asset inventory. So on the homepage here, you can see a high-level snapshot of what your asset inventory looks like, how many devices are sitting on your network, what network they're sitting on, as well as flagging key devices, such as many of you on the call here care specifically about the medical device, but other device types that are sitting on your network and what the statuses are. So this kind of gives you a quick snapshot, quick view of how devices are sitting on your network. And the cool thing about this homepage, especially maybe as a biomed technician who may care about certain aspects of this inventory, for example, maybe the 7,000 medical devices that are sitting on your network, you can customize this based on what you're looking for. So we have a whole set of pre-built, predefined dashboard and recording capabilities, where you can filter through and track specific areas that you care about for your specific cybersecurity program. And again, filter by the medical device, for example. So easy way to kind of get a view of what you're specifically looking for and hoping to get out of tracking asset inventories within your program. So let's jump here to our device overview page. So our device overview page gives you a snapshot of all the various devices, whether it be medical devices, IoT devices, or OT devices that are sitting on your network, to give you an idea of, what your overall inventory looks like. And again, you can filter this in a variety of ways. You can look at, okay, I have over 18,000 assets in my inventory, but 1,000 of them are high risk. So let's take a look at those right off the bat. You can see which ones may be online or currently offline. And again, as a biomed technician, you can filter by category. So you only want to see those 7,000 medical devices that are sitting on your network. You can drill into those. You also, as you can see, we also track types of clinical devices. So do you only want to dig into some of your most critical diagnostic devices within your network? You can drill into and look at the 129 imaging systems within your network and understand what their current status is. We also track patient devices, clinical IoT devices, devices involved in surgeries, clinical lab devices, and hospital information systems. A new capability that we've actually rolled out in the product recently is our device purpose capability. Our device purpose capability essentially takes this type of information a level deeper, so we can not only flag the types of clinical devices within your network or what types of medical devices are in your network, we can also flag what types of devices are where within your hospital system. For example, if you want to see a view of all clinical devices that are sitting in your emergency department, or all of your clinical devices that may be sitting in an ICU department, we can build some configurations on the back end to also get you this information. So that's something new and exciting that we're working on here at Claroty. But for now, let's dig into what a device profile looks like here. So I'm going to click into this MRI machine, the Siemens MRI machine, to give you an idea of the types of device attributes that are the foundation of an exposure management program within the product. So this is a Siemens MRI machine. As you can see here, it is rated as a critical risk score. So this may be a specific device on your network that you want to look into a little bit more. We also can track these devices with labels. So I mentioned these exposure scenarios that we can build in our solution outside of traditional vulnerability management. This specific device is flagged as an unsupported OS, as well as an exposed medical device with a critical vulnerability attributed to it. So you can see that right at the device level. In addition to this key information, we also give you key attributes on the product. So things such as IP MAC address, where your device is sitting on the network, what is the current location of the device, and where are we pulling this information from. So this kind of gives you an idea, initial asset inventory, initial flagging of exposures, what that looks like for a particular device. As we think about this device has a critical risk score, we do score each device as well as give an overall view of your security posture. So what I'm showing you here is this MRI machine that has a critical risk score of 71.2. It's measured on a variety of attributes based on both likelihood and impact of risk. So things such as what or how many known vulnerabilities are attributed to the device? Is it running on outdated firmware? Are there any weak default passwords attributed to the device? Where is the device sitting on the network and how is it communicating? Are there any current compensating controls on the device? And what is the impact for this specific device classification? So in this case, An MRI machine stores PHI. It's a diagnostic device, and if the device were to be down, it may result in inappropriate diagnosis or inappropriate operations of patient care, and all of that is factored into how we score and attribute risk. Another really cool capability in our product that looks at maybe the overall view of exposure management is our risk simulator. So this device is a critical risk. The click of a button, we can offer you Claroty recommended policies to get your risk score down to low, highlighting key areas that you may want to think about or drill into. So really interesting way to think about risk, thinking about risk beyond simply vulnerability management and how you can identify high-risk devices. On that note, the Claroty platform also offers, and this kind of goes back to that actionable recommendations piece that Ty was alluding to. Can you guys hear that? Apologize. This specific piece are our risk recommendations, and these are actually automated recommendations on a device that flag problem areas that you may want to be looking into. So, for example, we have 2 hardening recommendations on this device, one specifically flagging that this device is on outdated firmware, and you can drill into the alert and understand this device is running on firmware, what our recommendations are, and also how many devices are impacting. So in this case, we have 2 Siemens MRI machines with this model that are impacted by this specific outdated firmware device. Okay, so next we're going to drill into our risk section. The risk section of the product takes this foundational asset inventory that I just showed you on the Siemens MRI machine and implements it into core understanding, dashboards, capabilities, as well as information that feed into your overall exposure management program. So let's start with risk benchmarks, or our industry benchmarking capability. Our risk benchmarks give you a unique insight based on Claroty's robust customer database that we have within the healthcare industry to snapshot a view of where your risk stands in comparison to the industry average. This takes exposure management into account, as we're not simply looking at vulnerabilities or vulnerable devices, we're holistically looking at your overall risk and where you measure up. So in this case, this specific organization has a risk score that only 1.7 organizations within our customer database has a lower score. So overall, you're doing pretty good. As you can see here, your risk score is flagged as 47.2, and the lowest risk score in the industry that we can find is about 20.6. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we are. And we also profile our database and match organizations of similar shape and size to help you get an understanding of, okay, so I'm doing pretty good. What is that? What is a similar organization like? Where are they? How many devices do they have? And what's their risk score today? To give you a unique benchmark of where you sit in the industry. And we also do that for critical and high risk devices as well. You can drill in further into what your problem areas are. And this is really specifically interesting information as a technician to share with your leadership, so they can get an understanding of what their overall cybersecurity efforts look like, or maybe areas that they can improve in the future, or justification of how to better invest today. And again, another area where you can filter this specifically by medical device if you only want to look at devices that the biomed department is operating on today. On a similar note, from a dashboarding perspective, you can also drill into your risk overview. So this kind of takes it a level deeper, not necessarily comparing you to the industry average, but giving you a view of what your medical device fleet looks like today within your environment. So we can give you a view of your overall security posture. Again, your overall risk score is doing pretty good, as opposed to we were just looking at an MRI machine that had a critical or high risk score. We're also looking at things such as how many critical and high risk devices are on your network. What is the risk score distribution? Again, you can drill into common problem areas that are impacting your risk score. So in this case, vulnerabilities in this specific environment tends to be critical, but outdating operating systems is another critical issue that you may want to look into. So really interesting insights are giving you that overall snapshot here of types of devices, and again, these automated risk recommendations that we can provide within your network. So we want to talk about this concept of exposure management, but we don't want to lose sight that vulnerabilities is a critical point. So we do have a vulnerability page. As you can see here, this is our vulnerable devices page. Again, this can be filtered by specific area, where a device is sitting on the network, and several other key attributes here. In this specific case, let's look at vulnerable devices by model here. And you can see, for example, this particular medical device, this ventilator, this model currently has 65 vulnerable devices on your network. Of those 65 of them are classified as high risk. And they're also ranked in our system in priority group number 1. So what does this mean? This is a very critical model. There are a lot of vulnerabilities tied to this device, and they're also classified as high risk. So again, we're looking at vulnerabilities, we're looking at your overall risk. And in this scenario, this is probably a good model to look into and understand a little bit more on why they're specifically high risk within your network. So that's, kind of a snapshot of vulnerabilities. Our vulnerability overview page gives you a quick dashboarding capability on kind of the state of vulnerabilities in your network. We do have that key information, and you can also drill into things that Ty was mentioning, such as CVEs, vulnerability scores, etc. It's all available in the platform here. The last thing I want to touch on here before we close out in the product are our exposure scenarios. So I mentioned, the ability now within our platform to build exposure scenarios, common high risk scenarios that we see in healthcare environments. This is all done within our device auto actions rules. So in this particular instance, for example, we're tracking things such as an exposed asset with suspicious communications, or an exposed asset that's currently communicating with unencrypted PHI. These are all scenarios that we've built that help you look beyond vulnerability management, and also not only identifying these so that these are flagged within the device profile that I showed you, you can also build alerting mechanisms on these capabilities so you understand what devices are relevant to these exposure scenarios, but also you can get real-time communications on when they're popping up in your network. They're also heavily customizable, so you can build your own device auto action or exposure scenario based on your organization's overall risk tolerance. So again, this is a really good first step if you currently have your traditional vulnerability management processes down pat, to start thinking about exposure management and how to best get the most out of that, out of your platform, or Claroty xDome. So with that, that gives you kind of a quick view of the Claroty xDome platform, some key capabilities that can help you measure and assess risk, as well as how exposure management can help you up-level your risk management efforts or augment your traditional vulnerability management efforts within the platform. I'll pause there here, and I'll stop sharing my demo screen. Let's transition over here. Are there any questions before we close out? And let's see, did any come in throughout the presentation? Yep, it looks like we had a couple. So first question is, so how is the industry benchmarking capability used within your product today? Ty, do you want to speak a little bit about how we've seen adoption or value out of our industry benchmarking?
Yeah, I would say that someone with a managerial mindset is asking that question. That's a great question. So, I started talking about the 20 million devices we have, and millions of them being medical devices. We can only do that because we have 350 health systems, thousands of hospitals that have chosen Claroty, and we're managing their devices. So we see all this stuff, and we have hospitals in all shapes and sizes. So that's a predicate to actually having any meaningful benchmarking information to begin with, and we're lucky to do that. We're lucky that we have that with our clients. But trying to give that back to our clientele, they take that information, and they're able to say, very basically, here are all my medical devices, and here are the ones that are high risk. Here are the ones that are not. And so if you just think about it from a very basic perspective, we can be more granular, but I want to move the ones that are high risk into the bar chart column that's not high risk. And so for an organization to be able to see that from like facilities, size, and whether it's a children's hospital or an academic medical facility or what have you, they're very different. That I'm doing well or I'm not doing well, because otherwise there's no way to understand whether your program, where you think you're being effective, you're working 24/7, you're killing yourself, but you have no idea whether you're being effective or not. And then even past that, we can have another little green bar that says, well, here's where you could be. Because we know, like, so with the simulator tool you were showing, it's like, well, these things would further reduce risk if you could do those on these devices, and therefore you could even get your risk down further, and then we automate the processes to achieve it. So it's a wonderful way to start from, especially from a management level, to see where the impacts could be, and driving all the way down through operations to show how you can do it.
Awesome. Yep, totally makes sense. And thank you for sharing that additional context. I want to add, it's a really powerful capability. It was rolled out earlier this year. And again, we've seen a lot of interesting adoption or great feedback and help improve, value of the program. Looks like our last question here. So how does an organization go about implementing exposure management for the first time, and what is Biomed's role in this? That is a great question. So as we step back, as Biomed's role in general, my first thought to that is, do you have a platform like Claroty xDome or maybe something similar today? Before you implement an exposure management program, you need that initial asset visibility, and you definitely want to feel comfortable with the data set that you already have. And so, my recommendation would be, as a biomed, is, do you have an understanding of your asset inventory? Are you currently an end user of a solution like Claroty xDome? The solution may be owned by your security team, but definitely, become an end user if you're not, or you're not part of building out those program efforts. And then when it comes to exposure management, you may already, have all of those processes down. But if you're just thinking about exposure management, again, I would look at where you are in your journey when it comes to vulnerability management. The reality is, kind of going back to some of the points that Ty shared earlier, you can't assess or look at every vulnerability that floats through your system today. So I would first get an understanding, as a biomed technician, where you are with your vulnerability management efforts, or where are you addressing those from a high risk perspective, and then start building from there. What can you add, or realistically, we know you're resource strapped, you tend to be. Where do you have the bandwidth to add? So maybe kind of going back to some of those common scenarios that we see our customer base adopt. Think about what are other high risk scenarios, or if you use our benchmarking capability within xDome, taking a look at our benchmarking capability and understand what are the most critical risks within your environment that are contributing to your security posture in a negative way. That's where I would start. Maybe you're an environment and you uncover that you tend to operate many assets that are end of life or unsupported. The first step would be implementing something like an exposure scenario to understand not only what your current state is, but when a device becomes unsupported or end of life, that you have an understanding of that, and how that can feed into future state. So for example, if you have a device that's unsupported or end of life, implementing segmentation, ensure that that device that's a little bit more high risk isn't talking to any devices on the network that they don't have to be. Those are some key areas that you can think about as you start thinking about how you can implement exposure management for the first time and what your role is as biomed. I would say take a look at your most high-risk medical devices. Really do the analysis of which devices are most critical to patient care and patient safety, because at the end of the day, that's the ultimate goal. And understand where your IT security team is with its adoption of a platform like Claroty xDome, and kind of start from there. All right, it looks like that's the end of the time that we have here for questions. Any that we didn't get to on this call, we'll be sure to follow up. So if you have any other questions as well, feel free to submit and we'll follow up with you at a later date. Just want to say on behalf of Claroty, thank you so much for joining. We hope you learned something out of this presentation today, and we hope to see you again at a future
Great. Thank you so much for a great and informative demo. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit today's sponsor's website, claroty.com, to find out more about their products. Now, as promised, the answer to today's trivia question is ranch dressing. So congratulations to our winner, Leanne Zanel in Texas. Just a quick reminder, you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download your certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. If you've missed any of our past Tools of a Trade demos, including any by Claroty, please visit webinarwednesday.live to view our whole archive. We'll be back next month with another Tools of a Trade live demo, so visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and, of course, complimentary registration. Thank you once again for your time today, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.